The transformation happened at the edge of the world, which is what the boundary between water and land had always been to her. The witch had been clear about one thing: there would be no pain. That part of the pact was structural. Pain would compromise the work, and the work was the point. What the witch had not mentioned was the sound. The surface was loud in a way the deep never was. Not loud like a storm, which has a shape and a direction. Loud in every direction at once. Wind that did not stop. The constant low percussion of waves against rock. Birds calling to each other in the dark for no apparent reason. After a lifetime in water, which carries sound differently, which slows it and bends it and makes it something you feel before you hear, the air felt almost violent against her ears. She understood in those first minutes why creatures that lived above the surface had learned to stop paying attention to most of what they heard. There was simply too much of it. She stood. The legs held. There was no pain. The pact held on that point. But there was something the absence of pain did not cover. The weight. Without water, there was no counterforce. Everything pulled in one direction. The ground pushed up against the soles of her feet with a persistence that felt almost hostile, as though the land were something that had to be constantly negotiated with, rather than inhabited. She stood still for a long moment, letting her body relearn what it meant to be a vertical object in air, rather than a horizontal one in water. The body, she was learning, was very willing to adapt. The body had no loyalty to what it had been. The cold was different too. In the deep, cold was the temperature of everything. Not a condition, a medium. On the surface, cold came from outside. It moved against her skin. It found the places where the salt had dried and made them sting. She noticed this, the way she had been trained to notice everything, as data, recorded and filed. But she also noticed it in a way that had nothing to do with training. It was simply the first thing the surface had done to her that she had not been prepared for. In the distance, beyond the line of rocks, she could see the lights of the harbor. She walked toward them. The walking was something she had to think about at first. The distribution of weight, the transfer from one foot to the other, the way balance worked differently when you could not adjust in 3 dimensions. Within a quarter mile, it had become something her body was doing without her. The harbor lights grew closer. The witch had managed the practical details with the same precision she had applied to the pact. There was a room waiting when she arrived. 2nd floor of a lodging house, 2 streets from the harbor, run by a woman who asked no questions about where her tenants came from, only whether they could pay the week in advance. There were coins, enough for several weeks of ordinary expenditure. The market, the bread, the notebook, the shoes with the thin soles she had bought on the 2nd morning, because the first pair had not been designed for harbor stone. She had not been surprised by any of this. A siren arriving in a fishing town without a place to sleep is visible in the wrong way. The mandate required invisibility. The witch understood operational requirements. The harbor at night was not quiet. It was full of the kind of work that happens after the visible work is done. The accounting, the loading, the negotiating of terms that could not be spoken during the day. She moved through it carefully, the way you move through a place you are learning. She listened to conversations and did not join them, She read the boards outside the harbor office where the catchweights were posted. The numbers, the boat names, the names of the men who owned the boats. She memorized them. This was what she had come for. This was the work. 3 names she recognized from the mandate. 2 she could not yet attach to faces. The third, a license administrator, the man who processed the quota renewals, she found within the first hour. He was at the far end of the harbor, drinking with 2 other men, explaining something with the settled confidence of a person accustomed to being listened to. She noted the tavern. She noted the hour. She noted the 2 streets he would most likely take going home. She was good at this. In the deep, reading a current, its temperature, its direction, what it was carrying and where it had been, was the same discipline as this. The surface was simply a different kind of water. Everything moved. Everything left a trace. You only had to learn the pattern. Then she saw the prince. She recognized him before she understood how she recognized him. The way you recognize a thing you have been told to look for before you have consciously decided to look. The harbor master's son. The name at the bottom of the list. He was standing at the far end of the main pier, alone, looking at the water. Not in the way people look at water when they find it beautiful. In the way people look at it when it has taken something from them, and they have not finished deciding how to feel about that. He was the target. That was the first thing she registered, and it was the correct thing to register. The second thing, which came immediately after and had no operational relevance, was that he looked like someone who had not slept well in a long time. While she watched, an old dock worker approached him. The conversation carried across the water in fragments. The eastern grounds. 3 mornings empty. Not the season. The grounds themselves. Gone quiet. In the way that meant they were not coming back this year. Or the next. The prince listened without interrupting. He did not look defensive. He did not look like a man receiving news that surprised him. "Put it in the report," he said. "Your father's quota doesn't move with the report." A silence between them. The harbor moved around it. Then the prince said, quietly, "Put it in the report anyway." The dock worker left. The prince stayed at the water's edge, looking at the same dark surface he had been looking at before. Nothing had changed in his posture. The weight he carried had simply shifted slightly. The way a load shifts when you adjust your grip without setting it down. The siren filed this in a different place from the other observations. Not because it changed anything about the mandate. The mandate was unchanged. The name at the bottom of the list was unchanged. The title mechanism required what it required. She filed it differently because she could not, in that moment, locate the correct operational category for a man who knows exactly what his family has cost the sea and chooses, in the smallest way available to him, to register that he knows. It was not absolution. It was not even close to absolution. But it was something, and something without a category was something she would have to return to.